Imho Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning into In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
Imho Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Imho Talk Show, live and direct. Sir Charles in the booth in the building. And once again, I want to thank all y'all family for listening, for tuning in. Could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. And we for sure appreciate that right there. So like we always do about this time, got to give thanks to not only you family for staying tuned every week and listening in, but also to all those that support in many other ways, particularly our underwriters and our sponsors. So want to give a shout out to none other than continued supporter of the Jefferson School Foundation, and want to let everybody know they're calling all nonprofits and established organizations. The Jefferson School Community Conference Room is now available for your meetings and events, and it's free. Plus, the Jefferson School Foundation is gearing up for reimagine, redefine, and refuel for the future, with a fresh new look coming to the Jefferson School Foundation and City Center. So stay in touch and get the latest updates by visiting jeffersonschoolfoundation.org or by following them on Instagram at Jeffersons_school_foundation. All right, on Instagram at Jeffersons_school_foundation. And don't miss out on what's next. All right. So, and without further ado, after this next song, quick break, we're going to be right back. Sir Charles, Razor, Miss Max, Imho Talk Show with none other than Miss Rebecca Thomas, representing the literacy volunteers, and much, much more show after that you don't want to miss. For the people, by the people. Stay tuned. Imho. Hello.
Imho Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Imho Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. IMHO family. Sir Charles.
Why you gonna do it when I'm taking a drink of water? This don't make no sense. This Razor. How y'all doing?
I mean, like we live on air. I don't know if you know that. I mean, if you weren't ready, it ain't my fault.
No, I wasn't ready. I was parched this morning.
Yes, indeed, man. Thank you, studio audience. See, they clap for you anyway.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So y'all know where to find us. You know what it is. And tell a friend, because like we always do about this time, we are in here with none other than yet another representative from the Good Jefferson School Foundation, tenant there that goes by the Literacy Volunteers of Charlottesville and Albemarle. And for those that don't know, they can be found over there at 233 4th Street Northwest in Suite 220. I'm telling them the suite, Rebecca, so they can't say they couldn't find you. So Razor, normally, when the number starts with the 2, that means you got to go to the second floor.
That's right, second floor.
Is that right, Rebecca?
Yeah.
All right, second floor, Suite 220.
Charles playing with y'all this morning.
And so their website is literacyforall.org. And this is none other than Rebecca Thomas. She is the communications and marketing coordinator for Literacy Volunteers of Charlottesville. Rebecca, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's see. So let's start, with the obvious. Can you tell us a little bit about Literacy Volunteers and its mission, maybe for those who may never heard of it or may not be familiar?
Yeah, so we have actually been around since 1983. And we provide free, confidential, and inclusive one-to-one literacy tutoring and citizenship classes for adults in the greater Charlottesville area.
Okay. Got you. All right. And so give us a little more background on that as far as the organization and sort of how that came to be as as far as like maybe more the foundation of like how it started, like what was the purpose? Was there a big mission? Was there a big need that was seen, or was it more so something that may have been like picked up from another area? How did it get started?
So in the 1980s, a lot of community-based literacy organizations were starting to form because we were seeing adults that had some gaps in literacy or low literacy. And so in Charlottesville, we started Literacy Volunteers, and we primarily served native English speakers who just had some low literacy skills.
Okay.
And then as Charlottesville's demographics have changed, and as the public school system has maybe done a stronger job of not letting people fall through the cracks as much, we now serve primarily second language learners in the area, but we also still serve native English speakers that have some low literacy.
I have a question for you. So when it comes to literacy, so to speak, is there a goal of like a GED, or is there just a goal of being able to communicate with somebody?
So I think one of the great things about this organization is that it is so individually focused.
Okay.
So for some of our native English speakers, let's say, who have low literacy,
Mm-hmm.
they might go to PVCC's adult ed program trying
Mm-hmm.
to get a GED.
Okay.
And if their math skills or their reading skills are still too low to be able to be in those classes,
Mm-hmm.
then they would, PVCC's TJACE, the adult ed program,
Mm-hmm.
would send them over to us.
Okay.
So then
Okay.
we can work one-on-one with them until they're ready to be in those classes.
Okay.
And then sometimes for people who are working on certification programs like
Mhm.
GED or CNA, things
Mhm.
like that,
Okay. Cool.
we also have a one-to-one tutoring
Okay.
for them. So that way they can get that extra help that they might need.
Now I'm gonna ask you a tough question before Charles go, right?
Okay.
I'm gonna dive right in because I'm a fan. I worked at the Fountain Fund that was right
Oh, yeah,
around
yeah.
the corner from y'all, right? When it comes to the way society is post-COVID,
Mhm.
right? Education doesn't seem to be enough, even at a person who has went to after high school,
Mhm.
right? What would be, not playing devil's advocate, but what would be the goal of spending the time, besides it being just something that you want to do to make yourself feel better, of going to a place like yours and spending the time and effort? Can you kind of explain, and it not be for nothing, because
Mhm.
the world doesn't put value on that?
So do you mean as a volunteer or as a student?
As a student, because I want people to understand that what you do is important.
Okay.
And we want to get past their, like, in their closet, in their circles of, man, why you gonna do that? They don't give you a job no how. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That type thing.
Yeah.
So
What I really like about working there is that you see the tangible effects of what we do with our students.
Okay.
And so for obviously second language learners, these are people who are coming here. They have 2 hours of tutoring every week to just try and learn the language and try and be able to read, write, even get some of those educational opportunities that they had maybe in their home country that didn't transfer over to America. So many of them are working on just being able to go to college.
Are y'all afraid that y'all may be investing too much in second language cultures as opposed to the ones that's here?
Well, we serve anyone who has a need.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
like I said, we are originally our students were primarily native English speakers, but because the public school system has done a better job of making sure that people who are graduating have some levels of literacy, there's a little bit less of a need for what we do.
Cool.
For native English speakers, but we still absolutely have some of those folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anybody that comes in that is at a low literacy level, we want to serve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to follow the need, right?
Yes.
If the population is changing, you got to address the needs of your population.
No, that's a rabbit hole, Charles.
Yeah.
You sure you want to go down there?
I mean, like that's your population is your population. They don't have control over that.
I mean, but we already got a problem with the town and gown. So to act like there's not a problem from the people that's already here, just because more people come into the area,
right,
does not mean that you stop serving the people that are here just because somebody else came into the house.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's why I said that's that rabbit hole that I'm starting to see.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that one of our hopes is, we've been around for over 40 years, but I feel like so many people don't know that we exist.
I didn't until I started working at the Jefferson.
Yeah. And so for people who have low literacy level and are native English speakers, they might not know that we have these services. There's some great services in Charlottesville. There's this, quite a few different kind of nets that are formed for people. But if you don't know the net exists, you can't get that help. So we're hoping to just let more people know we are here. We're providing a free service.
Can I ask you why y'all use that title? Or Charles, maybe you can help me too. Why did y'all start calling it native English speakers? Because that, for lack of a better way of looking at it, that almost seems like an additional separation of being just called an American. And for the people in my community who, y'all were primarily serving beforehand, it seems like an additional barrier to say that I'm not accepted as just an American. I have to, my language has
Hold
to be
on,
broken
Razor.
down.
I'm just asking. Let me take this one, Rebecca.
Charles, help me out here a little bit.
American though is your nationality. You got to remember, like people came here from all countries, different languages. So even though English is the primary language, like we still are a melting pot and always have been. So just being American doesn't automatically mean that you should or have to speak English.
So right. So
let's keep it real.
So all right. So since we want to keep it real here for a second, if we go back 5-10 years, right? How many people of Caucasian descent were y'all actually serving?
I don't know those demographics.
That number would be low compared to African Americans, right? So I'm thinking about the melting pot that y'all's talking about.
Yeah, so I would go even
it looked like it's melted
that.
chocolate. That's what it looked like.
So when we first started in the 80s, absolutely.
Right.
And then our demographics really started to shift to second language learners around the early 2000s. So it's even been about 20 years.
So it went from pretty much, I didn't go to college, so I'm going to talk very blatant. So it went from Black to Spanish.
Yeah, and now I would say it's I mean, to very oversimplify.
I'm sorry I'm pressing you, but it's just that I'm trying to make sure I understand.
Yeah. And so if we're going to really talk about demographics, looking at the groups of students that we have, are not primary, but the largest demographic of folks that we serve right now are actually from Afghanistan.
Okay.
Because the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, was able to bring over so many folks as the government was falling.
But
it's still not Caucasian, is what I'm saying. So
and I'll give you a perfect example, Razor. Like so Rebecca, I'm originally from Madison County. And so a lot of people don't know, but the majority of like folks who get services like literacy services or free clinic services, free reduced lunch services, are Caucasian families.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it really depends on your demographic.
But do they call them English speaking? Do they break it down like that? Not saying that y'all don't.
So
but
we actually do. So native English speaker is just the term that we are using in education and in the government. So native English speaker is going to be anybody who grew up speaking English. And so it's important that we distinguish that from second language speakers, right? Versus Americans, right? Because you can be a second language speaker and an American. And you can be a native English speaker and not an American, right? For maybe folks that are coming over from, let's say, England. And so for like, since we're a nonprofit, for grant reporting purposes and things like that, we need to track who are we serving that is has English as a second language versus, we also call it basic literacy. Because for basic literacy students, these would be native English speakers who need help not just with reading, but also math skills and things like that. So it's really just as a way to distinguish who needs help learning how to speak English for second language learners, and who needs help with more of those kind of basic literacy skills.
Yeah, I'm just fearful. Like I said, I'm not pressing on you. I'm just fearful that this is the gateway to further separating my community from what's looked like as Americans. Because it's when you come to a metropolitan area, like, so to speak, like Charlottesville, the base of the ownership is doesn't look like me, that own homes and things of that nature, right? But then, like Charles said, we see that the people who get the majority of the like EBT cards and everything don't look like me too, right? But we always seem to find ways to separate in language that eventually become indoctrinated into more separation for us, that we don't get services. Like people from Afghanistan, and they need help. But it seems like it's much easier for them to get everything that's being offered by nonprofit organizations than it is the people who were brought here, who, you know, African Americans don't have a flag. We don't have so many things that when we go to get services, reparations and everything, we don't qualify for. So when we come up with languages that we fit in that doesn't just call us Americans, I get nervous.
Yeah, I get that. But I would say for the purposes of our organization, basic literacy it has nothing to do with race. Whoops. It is, like I said, just anybody who grew up speaking English.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And don't live in fear, Razor.
Oh,
Don't live in fear.
Man.
There's plenty for everybody. This is the land of milk and honey. That's why everybody comes.
Just because it's plenty for everybody doesn't mean it gets divided for everybody.
True.
You know what I'm saying? Like
but we shouldn't cut anybody else short if they need something.
We get cut short.
Right. And that's not right either. But that ain't Rebecca's fault.
No, no, I'm just saying, like, I feel as long as we keep conversation open, then maybe there's things that, organizations wasn't thinking about that 5 years from now can't be fixed because now the train is moving in this direction. So then we have to come up with something else to give you in order so that you don't miss out on something that you should have had from the beginning. And that's where I was asking about, when we start talking about literacy of, people who speak English, but are almost viewed as, you need additional help as if you're a refugee coming in the title. It just, it seems like a slippery slope to me. That's all.
Got you. We are joined family by Rebecca Thomas, Communications and Marketing Coordinator of the Literacy Volunteers of Charlottesville and Albemarle. And so, Rebecca, so speaking, of that, before we move off of this train of thought, like when it comes to folks who want to get involved, what kind of experience is needed to be a tutor?
So we just need an adult who is willing to spend time with us. So we provide all training. You do not have to have any teaching experience for this. We provide monthly trainings for new tutors. And then once you are trained with us, we provide professional development all throughout that time as well. So we want our tutors to be successful, and we do everything that we can to make sure that they have those tools to be successful.
Cool. Cool. I love the work y'all do, by the way.
You. Yes, indeed. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about the impact for the student, but touch on the ways that the tutoring impacts the volunteers. To maybe some success stories that that may encourage some folks who may have the time and know-how, but maybe a little reluctant, but maybe teetering on coming to volunteer. Like, what impacts have you seen on the volunteer?
So prior to my to me actually working at Literacy Volunteers, I was a tutor as well.
Okay.
So I tutored for about a year. And so we ask that our tutors essentially commit to a year. Of course, like you can go on vacation and things like that. But essentially you provide 2 hours of tutoring service every week with your student.
Okay.
And what is amazing is that you have 2 hours with an individual that you probably wouldn't necessarily meet.
Okay.
You're meeting with people outside of your circle.
Okay.
And so it's really rewarding to have this complex relationship with people.
She's the success story, Joe.
That's a good story.
And so we always say that we want our tutors to get as much out of this as our students. And I think our tutors would agree that they do.
And sort of to Razor's point earlier too, what that makes me think about, like, what are some of the reluctancies? Because like we could be real prideful, right? And that's any demographic, ethnicity, nationality, we in our own ways be kind of prideful on stuff. So what are maybe some of the ways that you all encourage the students, the people who may need help, but maybe embarrassed?
So like I said, it is confidential. Students and tutors can meet in our office, which is at the Jefferson School City Center, but they can meet anywhere that's public, right? So if somebody wants our services but is embarrassed to maybe meet at our office or someplace like that, they can go to the library, they can meet at a coffee shop. So we are here to make this a successful experience for our students. And work on what they want to work on, right? So if a student wants to be working on their GED, then that's what we will kind of be focusing on. I recently interviewed the student tutor pair where the student was working at a restaurant, and the manager said, all of the Safe Serve stuff better than I do. Like, I want you to get Safe Serve certified. And that's difficult. Like, that's a thick book.
Yes, it is.
And so that's what her tutor and her did, was work on going through this book. And it took, they weren't successful maybe the first time, but 6 months they worked together to go through this book, and finally she gets Safe Serve certified. She's able to ask for a raise.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
That's
because
right.
like she knew the material.
Yeah.
Right? She knew it better than the manager, which is what the manager said. But
Okay.
knowing the material and being able to take the test are two very different things.
Yeah, the test was tough.
Yes, indeed. And so do you find yourself partnering with other organizations? Is there any outreach done to try to help your mission? Is that beneficial?
So we work closely with the PVCC Thomas Jefferson Adult Education or Adult Career Education. They offer also free continuing or adult ed programs. So GED and then also ESL classes as well. So we share a lot of the same students. Like I said, if somebody's coming to TJ Ace wanting to get their GED and they're not quite high enough for that, then they'll send them our way.
Okay.
We work a lot with the International Rescue Committee because we have a really successful citizenship program.
Okay.
So we have a 98% pass rate for our citizenship students.
Awesome.
So last year, for example, we had 44 students get their citizenship.
Okay.
Wow.
So we work a lot with IRC.
What's the time frame on that, on the citizenship? If you don't
So it changes based on administration and based on what's going on. So during COVID, there was this huge backlog. And so now we're seeing students being able, when they apply for citizenship, to get their interview date much more quickly.
And Rebecca, so as you said, you've seen sort of multiple sides and facets of literacy volunteers. So I'm curious about sort of the evolution of the organization, like as you see demographics changing and you know and what have you, like what's some of the changes since its original mission that you've seen that kind of brings you up to now to keep it impactful?
Well, I think our citizenship program is actually one of those. So that's been around for about 15 years, and we've seen it really blossom. But then we also are seeing, for example, we're starting a writing class where students that are at a higher level that maybe we wouldn't be able to serve, they're a little bit, they're almost ready for college classes, let's say. We are offering a free writing class that they can have with a former writing teacher from UC Santa Barbara. So things like that.
I have a question for you. Via Miss Max, I can't take credit for this. This is a good one. You said that it changes depending on administration, right? So let's just say, without calling names, for the elephant, how long would it take? And for the donkey, how long would it take?
Well, I think it depends on the elephant.
Okay.
The last one, there was definitely more of a longer backlog. And then COVID, of course, just threw everything. And then with the current administration.
You're talking about 2 months, 6 months, a year and a half?
We were seeing, I'm not entirely sure of the
time frame.
Yeah, of the time frame, because this was also before I started working. But I think it was taking like quite some time, like a year, things like that. And then as the current administration came in and as COVID started to get under control a little bit more, then they were trying to catch up. So we're seeing it move along much more quickly now because there was quite a long backlog.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So again, we're joined by Rebecca Thomas of Literacy Volunteers here locally. So Rebecca, what about some of the resources in the communities, like new events that may be coming up, just things in general that you may want people to know about and things that we could be supporting as a community? Right.
Well, I think since we've been talking a lot about students, one of the really critical things that I want people to know is if you are interested in being a student, we take new student intakes on the last Monday of every month. So tomorrow, actually. So if somebody is interested in being a student, call us. Our number is 434-977-3838 to make that appointment.
Can you get that number one more time, please?
Yes, 434-977-3838.
All right. Thank you.
434-977-3838.
I tried to buy you time.
That's pretty easy to remember.
You over there with them stuttering fingers.
That's pretty easy.
Type the thing up, Sir Charles.
So yeah, I want to make sure that people know how you can become our student. So you would call up, we'd schedule an appointment. to get your information and things like that. Make sure that we're the right fit for you. And if we're not, then we would encourage you to go to different organizations. And then of course we always need tutors. It's in our name. That's how we're able, like last year we served 400 students. So the only way that we can serve 400 students is if we have volunteer tutors.
Do y'all, when a person is a tutor, does any of the certificates or anything transfer over to, like, if I wanted to take that and become a counselor, or if I took that and I wanted to become a teacher of sorts, does any of that transfer over, the things that y'all send people for?
So for this tutor, you mean? It wouldn't necessarily transfer over, but I think it's really good experience. And so one of the things that we see frequently are some of our tutors then end up becoming teachers or second language teachers, things like that. So we have a new tutor training typically every month. We had one yesterday and trained 16 tutors, which was very exciting. Lunch was provided by Al Carbone. So we usually have a local restaurant provide lunch. And that's always a tasty place to go. The next one is September 28th. And then after that is October 19th. But we also always provide information sessions where people are like, I'm interested in this, but I don't know if this is something that I want to do. So every month we provide some Zoom information sessions. And so the next one is September 12th.
September 12th.
But essentially, anybody that's interested in becoming a tutor, if you can't make any of those dates, just talk to us. We need the help.
So Rebecca, I think maybe the last thing I have for you is how something that we address with all of our guests that come from the good Jefferson School. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, they are at 233 4th Street Northwest, Suite 220. Which floor is that, Razor?
Second floor, Sir Charles. They start with a 2. Isn't that what you told the people in the beginning, Sir Charles?
So at the Jefferson School, so Rebecca, we got to ask you, what does it mean to you? And you can speak on behalf of the of Literacy Volunteers organization as well, but to be a part of a historical foundation and to be a tenant in a building with so much history, like just tell us a little bit of that feeling and that experience to be a part of the Jefferson School.
So I'm actually fairly new to Charlottesville. I've been here for about 3 years. Before that, I was in West Virginia for teaching there, and then I'm originally from Southern California. So the more that I move east and like moving here, like you feel the history a lot more. And I don't know, it's just really rewarding, I think, to be in a historic place where we are continuing to serve the community. And so it's just getting to continue to write the history of Charlottesville and serve the folks of Charlottesville.
Got you. Thank you for that. Very well said. Very well said. So Rebecca, please keep us posted on everything that you all have coming up, so we can keep communicating this great work and keep getting you support you need.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well.
Imho Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories. More people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning into In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Sir Charles.
Smacks.
Razor.
In the booth in the building to close out the bottom of the hour and the top of the show. Miss Max.
Good interview.
Yeah, to get well, thank
Good
you.
interview.
Thank you.
know, Razor
Yet
got
again.
to depress people a little bit. Wouldn't be an episode of In My Humble Opinion without it. You know,
Be without it.
Like,
it was a good interview.
Yeah, it just I don't know. It's just something about the organization is excellent. I watched them when I was working at the Jefferson with the Fountain Fund. It's just the name that we're added to that gave me a problem. Like it just does. Like it just seems like the opening to further separate us from being Americans.
Right. I understand.
Based on language, though, Razor.
Absolutely, language.
I'm still hung up on that part, though. Man.
The power
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why.
Life and death is in the tongue, sir.
You know what you sound like, though? You sound like one of them old black people.
I am one of them old black
like
people.
that don't like that. Like that. Be like,
Just
too
can't
many
move
Mexicans.
on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like one of them people that be like, like that forget that we were discriminated against at once upon a time too. And then when there's new people in the country, we turn around and sound the same way that people sounded about us.
Well, the reason I sound that way is because every time somebody has an issue, they try to attach it to Black people's struggle. So that's the problem I have.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Regardless of what your gender is or what your mission is, you come to Black people for them to understand what you're going through, get your resources, and then separate yourself.
Yeah, and that's every minority group. That ain't even just race.
So hey, I'm gonna holler every time I see it. They ain't gotta listen.
Yeah. Like, so I feel you there. But I always go back to, like, I try not to sound like that I'm victim blaming, because again, like I realize that resource is plentiful to help everybody. The issue is the powers that be sometimes garner the resources and try to and put us against each other so that they don't have to share to the full extent of what they have.
But Charles, that makes sense, but it's confusing, because just because there is plentiful over here, if I don't give it to you, I don't care what's over there. In Charlottesville, we know that there are millionaires here, right? But we also know that we got people laying on the street walking around with no shoes.
Yeah, but that's my whole point, though, is that just because people are unfair with the resource doesn't mean we don't have the resources to help everyone.
The resources isn't
or
there.
take advantage of it always.
If there's no food on my plate, there's nothing to eat. That's the way I look at life.
I see both sides.
I mean, I get that. Like, but I'm just trying to clarify that it's like we can't blame the person that's in need.
Oh no,
That's
not. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is stop grouping everybody in with Black people. That is the problem, and that is why I believe we don't get the necessary things to advance ourselves. Is because we are always depleted. If 100 Black people need something, and then somebody got another issue, they incorporated with us. They give that $10 to the 500 people, but the ones who holler the loudest are the people that get it. We may or may not get some resources, and then people go on into the next one has a problem and then incorporate it with us again. That's just that's my reality.
Don't you think people will still find an issue if we start pay attention to the semantics and clearly define when a resource is Black focused and this focus and that focus? Don't you think there'll just be another reason to have an issue?
I think it's okay for me to say I'm Black and I got an issue. Like, I know that most people are scared, but it's okay for me to say I'm Black and I got an issue. I got a Black issue.
I agree with that 100%. The only thing that I'm trying to just clarify, though, is that that's treading very, very dangerous waters, because
it is dangerous. We over here drowning.
But my point, though, is that like, sort of the vitriol that comes up from, like, public discussion when we see new people coming in or new groups coming in and they're getting resources. The issue is it's the oldest trick in the American book, right? They put us against each other, and if we're not careful, that will continue to happen.
I'm not against it.
Like, so we misdirect sort of where the issue is, because the issue should always be at our government or whatever powers that be to say, stop harboring our stuff and give it to all of us. Stop trying to pick and choose and earmark where you gonna put it, because we know you got it.
Yeah, but the uncomfortable conversation that we haven't attacked is we African Americans are not we don't have a flag. We don't have a place that we came from. We don't. So they use that against us. So I'm never.
We have a flag. You always tell you that. Like, we just don't congregate under it. But Marcus Garvey gave us a flag. Pan-Africanism is real.
Is it?
What Malcolm X
got a check from it?
What Malcolm X tell us, though, is like we have what we need. It's just that we rather be subservient. Like, we were trained to be subservient. We just choose not to be.
I understand that, but what you're doing now is you're blaming the victim. It's just what you said to me.
Well, that right there, I'm blaming the victim.
Now
that's some accountability on that one, though. Because we got choices to make.
But no, what I'm saying is, like, I understand the way the rules are written, that if you come from another country, they ask you, what's your nationality? You can check a box. You have a flag. You have a country that you exiled from, came from, whatever, and that you can get resources. We as African Americans, or depending on what's going on, whether we're African American, whether we're Black, whether we're people of color, it gets so. Everybody else has hard things that you can look at. We got all this stuff going on that's turmoil that we can never grasp hold of. It's like trying to grab fog. And the problem is people will bring the fog into their fight because we've been in it 400 plus years until they get what they need, and then they move on. They call you friend when they need you. You don't hear from them no more. It's sort of like an election. How many people show up at these black churches trying to get people to talk to their congregations that you don't see them no other time? And we keep hollering about what we gonna do and what we not gonna do, but the simple fact of the matter is this went on with my grandparents, my great grandparents, and on to my generation, and I'm trying to figure out a way to stop it for my children.
I feel you.
And a lot of people, and I hate to say this, if we honest, and I heard this in barbershop, I cut for 27 years, a lot of people will say, okay, I don't want to go through this no more, so I am going to marry outside of my race so that my kids can have a better day. They can identify with something else, right?
That's the slave mentality right there.
It is, but it's a very real mentality, especially after we become famous, get checks, get degrees, all that type of stuff. We become not good enough. Like, we're sitting in here now, regardless if we have arguments, disagreements, or whatever. I got a black wife, I got black children. You got a black wife, you got black children. We are a minority's minority. Yeah, you the one got me started there. I said,
I do have a question.
I got you.
Hold up. No, I do got.
Come on.
Come on. Don't bite your tongue down.
No. It's actually back to where the conversation kind of originated and talking about public resources and whether or not you think that the current state of those things and the availability will change at all if Kamala wins the presidential election.
I think that we're going to do her worse than we did Obama, and we expect her to. Well, Obama, we expected to go in there and paint the White House black, right?
Which was a mistake.
With her, we're already looking at, well, we know she's not going to do nothing for us because she got a Jewish husband, and she used to put black people away in California, which was her job, y'all. And she was just good at her job. But we already have things that we have decided that she's not going to do. The only people that's going to actually benefit from what she do, from her being in that position, is the pride that's going to come to our African-American sisters. Like, y'all should be extremely proud, just like we were for Obama. You know what I'm saying? Y'all should be extremely proud. I don't care what her mom was, her dad was. She is a sister of color, and y'all have a right to throw that to the highest mountaintops.
Is this the same razor from last week?
Is that all we're going to get out of her presidential term if she wins?
That's it. That's it. Unfortunately, like, I mean, we're gonna have the honeymoon phase, and that's it.
Is Razor beating around the bush though? Because let's keep it 100. What's the main difference between her and Barack? She a woman.
Yeah.
Let's keep it 100. There's too many people still who are chauvinistic.
I wasn't going to say that, but
who won't vote for her or won't listen to her because she's a woman in the highest office. Let's keep it 100. And that's very, very unfortunate. But that's going to be her biggest obstacle.
Yeah. What black women were done so wrong during slavery, like, y'all were really beaten because of the way you look, and Master and them wanted piece of that, you know what I'm saying? So then you got the wife beating on you, Master beating on you, your husband beating on you because now he got to raise a light-skinned kid and he black as me. Like, I mean, so when it comes to Kamala, when she go up in there, like, there's black women that's gonna feel some type of way about her. You know what I'm saying? There's black men that's gonna feel some type of way. There's white women that's gonna feel some type of way about it, because even though they might talk trash about Hillary was a white woman. So now you wouldn't do this for a white woman, but you'll do it for this black lady. Well, then, matter of fact, Trump said, well, she turned black 2 days ago. You know what I'm saying?
Do you listen to anything
Raisin never ceases to amaze me. I just got to look in awe.
Hey, look, we got guests. Like, not only the thousands of people listening on air, but we got guests in the room.
Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Lady. How you doing? I ain't even see you walk up here. I'm sorry.
Miss Max, we are against the break, so I want to make sure you get to your point.
Yeah, we get it.
Did you have a point?
Let's go to break.
So, Max,
let's go to break.
So as we go to break, there's a name I want to say.
Okay.
Breonna Taylor. Breonna, we got to say her name, Breonna Taylor.
Breonna Taylor.
Because for those who didn't see the news, those cops were pretty much acquitted. They blamed her boyfriend for her death, for them to come in without a warrant, bust in. Her boyfriend didn't know if they were burglars, robbers, whatever the case is. And he was trying to protect them. And no justice for Breonna Taylor as of now. Sadly.
Situation.
Yeah.
IMHO Talk Show.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
Imho Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Sir Charles.
Max.
Razor.
That's right. Back like we never left. Got to do it for the people. And we have a very, very special guest with us. When she and her team reached out, I just had to oblige. I said, now, Deanna, we got a jam-packed show, but who can say no to Miss Deanna McDonald, right? Am I right?
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show, Deanna. Because and also thank you for partnering with us, in my humble opinion, through our Charlottesville Inclusive Media Project partners, which is Vinegar Hill Magazine and the great Sarad Davenport that wears so many hats and is so influential and has been a pillar of this community his whole life. Because you tapped us to help you out with the current initiative that you have not been in the seat of for too long, but you hit the ground running. Talk about none other than the development going on over in the Fifeville neighborhood. So you're working with Piedmont Housing Alliance, you're working with the Fifeville Neighborhood Association, and you are coordinating quite a bit as it comes to that development that I'm sure most of our listeners have heard about over there on Cherry Avenue at the old Estes Grocery. So go ahead and let the folks know sort of the inner workings of this project, how you got involved with it and what it's about exactly.
Sure. So again, thank you for having me. So I came to this project because I'm a nurse and this is my heart work. I do community health work.
Okay.
And so the Fifeville Neighborhood Association has been working a really long time around the projects in their neighborhood, things that are meaningful to their community. And the grocery store has been on tap for a while. There hasn't been a grocery store there for like almost 20 years. And so that has been an issue. And I come to that issue as it relates to food access, food equity, and health disparities, right?
Okay.
So the built environment is a part of the social determinants of health. So taking down a grocery store or not having a grocery store is hugely impactful. And if you missed yesterday's event at the Jefferson School, Aline Carey was talking about the difference between a food desert and food apartheid, right? And I think it was Karen Washington that quoted the term food apartheid, which is basically like the systemic ability to remove food access from certain populations and what that does to those disadvantaged populations.
Do you know how many people, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your introduction, but how many people live in the Fifeville neighborhood? And are we talking like elderly disabled or families?
So the Fifeville neighborhood looks really different than it used to look.
Okay.
So it is classified, if you've ever seen the marker, as a historically Black neighborhood.
Okay.
However, it doesn't look like that anymore. And that is, in large has to do with displacement and gentrification. So there are about 5,000 residents, and I can't give you off the top of my head, but it's like the population all across Charlottesville, right? So it doesn't look like that anymore. However, the Fifeville Neighborhood Association centers the values of the marginalized people of that area, of those that have been displaced and suffered from systemic changes.
Okay.
And Deanna, so what's some of the methods that you're using to outreach to the community? Like you just mentioned yesterday, you had the kickoff, I believe, of the first community-wide, I guess, or area-wide forum where folks can come in and learn and share their suggestions and concerns. So talk a little bit about that and other ways that you're trying to engage the community.
Yeah, sure. So so I came to this group a year ago and we've been talking about we need to engage the community, right? We need to have collective bargaining, right? Because you can't do it alone. And the Fifeville Neighborhood Association are just that, neighbors, regular people with jobs, some of them 2-3 jobs. So with my company coming on board, we decided to do a community engagement initiative. And it was funded by a grant from CACF. And so because they were like, we needed grant writers. Like, how can we get this money? Because there is no money in the Fifeville Neighborhood Association.
CACF?
Yes, the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation.
Okay.
So
the biggest grantors in the region.
Yeah. So they got a grant from them. And so we are using that to hire community advocates. So we are asking the community, if you have people located in the Rose Hill neighborhood, the 10th and Page neighborhood, the Fifeville neighborhood, and the Ridge Street neighborhood, we focus those 4 sister neighborhoods to this historically Black neighborhood also historically Black neighborhoods. We focus those, but we also understand the reach and the call for, this is a call to action for anybody who connects with this space in this place, because this was a hub of Black Charlottesville. So we're asking all people to come to this call. If you want to write a grant, if you know someone who's a philanthropist that wants to donate funds to support this grocery store, if you know an entrepreneur that wants to own a grocery store, please report to this conversation. And so I started with the neighborhood association leaders because my mama raised me right, and you got to get permission to go to somebody's house.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So I
Don't
started
just show
with them.
up.
Absolutely not. And they gave us permission to do this work, and they said it's much needed. And so this is really from the heart of what they say that
Okay.
they want in that neighborhood.
Okay.
They want to bring a grocery store back. And so the community engagement design started with those leaders. We kicked off the first at-large community forum yesterday at the Jefferson School. We're going to have another one September 4th at 5:30 p.m. at the Jefferson School. And that one's going to focus on the possibility of a community-owned grocery store. So anybody wanting to invest in their community, come to the conversation. Anyone interested in what does community-owned look like? Because we also understood we need some education around that, right? Charlottesville has never had a community-owned or co-op model.
So give us a quick lesson on that. What does that mean?
So the co-op model means where you would buy ownership. You would buy, just like you go to Walmart, Sam's Club or the big Walmart club and buy a membership. You would buy a lifelong membership in that model. But when you buy that membership, you also buy a vote. So you have a stake, a say in who's hired, what things are carried in that store. You have a say of who's running. You also have a say in government, right? Because once you start controlling some of those dollars, you have a say in who's listening to you, right? So it's about bringing power back to the community, not corporations taking money out of the community, but right here, staying here in the community.
Now, when you talk about power in the community too, a part of that is, like you said, the face has changed of the neighborhood. What are some of the methods that you've learned about or that is being talked about when it comes to like, how do we, like, the importance of home ownership and the importance of not just buying in for commercial space, but also buying in to make sure that the neighborhood and the community still looks reflective of its diversity.
Right. And that's a challenging conversation.
And history. Yeah.
Right. So these neighbors, especially the ones that have been there all their lives, they're looking at their house that may have been bought for $20,000 now going up for, $1 million, $500,000 right behind that. And then their taxes go up. The families are having hard times paying the taxes, trying to keep the family homes. They're getting calls from people that want to buy their homes and flip them. Right. So holding on to land, because they ain't making any more land, right? Holding on to those properties means a lot, right? But again, I think it takes community. I think and sometimes in our community, like, we don't talk about what we're going through, right? We don't talk about the fact that we might not have access to fresh fruits and vegetables that we're eating out of a can because that's what we can get to, right? And so we got to make it real for the people, that these are real people that need to report to the conversation, and we need to do it together. Sometimes we're so spread out, and it's not by accident. Charlottesville a lot operates in silos. That is not by accident. When you separate people, again, they don't have that collective bargaining, that collective weight and power.
And has this process or this conversation reached a point where or the organizers have reached out to city officials, or I'm thinking maybe the city manager and people like that, just to have a conversation of this is our priorities, this is what we'd like to see happening and what we're planning?
So this actually started out of a Charlottesville small area plan. So the Fifeville Neighborhood Association has been doing the work. They've been in conversations with the city, been in conversations with UVA. And again, they got this unique agreement with this developer because the developer owns it, right? So we're talking about trying to get them to do what the community wants, right? They own it. They could do what they want, but they have this agreement that they will hold a space, 5,000 square feet, hold that space for a grocery store for a certain amount of time. So we've got this big push, hopefully trying to find interested people by November, right? Until they have a certificate of occupancy, means when the building is up and ready to go, they have committed by this engagement that the city helped them do with this developer, and hold that space for that time.
Is there a building on the land now? I'm not too familiar with the Fifeville area, so I don't know.
Yeah, so this is the old Estes building.
Okay.
People here are nostalgically associated with. It was a hub.
Yeah.
Estes would serve the people. You could run a tab. They weren't worried about whether you could pay it back or not. This was a place where if you needed food, you could go get it. Also, Sarad mentioned yesterday he learned how to play checkers in the parking lot of the old Estes. So this was a community hub. And so, yes, the old Estes building, it will be torn down and it's going to be redeveloped. And Charles mentioned that we work in partnership with PHA. So I just want to clarify some things. There are entities. PHA is an entity associated with Woodard to build these affordable housing. And everybody knows what affordable housing is different to other people, right? It's not the same for me or you. So what affordable housing looks like. Fifeville actually really got into that conversation to help bring down what affordable is going to look like also there. So they're working on that. From that perspective.
Deeply affordable.
But this community engagement is all Fifeville. This is not a partnership. The developer is not in on this community engagement. PHA is not in on this community engagement. This is Fifeville saying we want to engage our community. We need our community, and we hope they will come and answer our call and support us.
And I want to make sure that the listeners don't miss something either. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you all, the community, I feel as a whole, the association would much rather it be Black businesses, Black developers, and folks who are helping to take ownership of these projects and commercial spaces. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So just to clarify, Fifeville has values that center the historical context of that neighborhood. So it is centered, and they say we center Black ownership, Black leadership, but they understand what the political area looks like. So we talk about the marginalized and disenfranchised, right? So they understand that context, but they absolutely do, which is why the marketing said, buy back the block, right? There is no Black ownership in a historically Black, no commercial ownership, to be clear. Ownership in a historically Black community. And that's what they're saying. So they are prioritizing. Again, community looks different. They work with everybody. They're working with the developer. They're working with PHA. They work with the other businesses in that building, in that community. So we understand that it takes us all.
And there's Black businesses, but they don't own their spaces.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
And that is the difference.
They don't own the land.
They don't own the land. And you will hear like a couple of them are like, oh, this developer owns the place that I rent from right now. Right. So the developer owns like the block. And that's why it was marketed to those people that understand that. Like, come to this because we want to get a piece of the block.
I know Razor has a question for you. I was curious what role UVA, because you said you all were in conversation with UVA, what role they would have in this project. But I know Razor has a question as well.
Did you want to answer Max's?
Yeah, sure. So at this moment, UVA is not in on this project, right? And so let me be clear. We have conversations and we ask for all the community to come. We send out the email blast, come if you want to be and partner in this work. So they send all different agents, send their partners, and we engage in conversation. But actively, UVA has not committed to any part of this grocery store conversation. And I think, the same thing goes when we talk about systemic. The city can report to this conversation if they want to make sure a grocery store is built there. UVA, if there's a philanthropist, and if this couple of people in the community want to come together, form a corporation, form a nonprofit, a group, and organize around a grocery store, we are operating from possibility.
Okay.
How you doing? Thank you for everything that you're doing. The question I would have is, here in Charlottesville, you have like what's known as like the Black elitists, and then you have the people who've grown up here, and then you have like the implants is a bad word, but the people from outside of Charlottesville that came here and they're doing things, right? Have y'all developed to where the person has to be from Charlottesville, or if they don't have a stellar credit report, or that, they might have some hiccup, they might match the community that they're trying to serve? What I'm pretty much asking is, even though we may want it to be Black, are we going to have rules and regulations that pretty much only allow a certain percentage of us to even sit down at the table?
So you make a good question and a good point in who can own here. And the Fifeville Neighborhood Association does not get to say who can. They get to make a recommendation to the developer. That person or group or entity still has to go through the processes of finding the funding and all of the things to own property. What we hope in this is that, like I said, we're looking for grant writers, people who, you may be a developer that wants to come and be an advisory board to the Fifield Neighborhood Association. We are looking for all resources, somebody that could help groups like that, or somebody who may just have a dream of owning a grocery store and don't know how to do it, right? So can somebody come along and partner and walk alongside them, and let's get to the finish line. As you mentioned about the elitists versus the who been here versus come here, I engage in that conversation quite differently because my family goes back 5 generations here. My great grandfather helped build the railroad that brought commerce to Charlottesville. And so, but I was raised in Philadelphia. I spent every summer coming here. I was here. My grandmother's here. Like my mother's here. We are all here. And I've been doing work in this community for over 20 years. And so people will still be like, oh, she's not from here. And I'm like, I'm from here. You can't tell my grandma that. You know what I mean? So what does that look like?
And why are we talking about that?
And why are we talking? Thank you. And so that's why we wanted people to understand that even though with the grant funding that we got, we could not reach the whole community. We can't reach all of Charlottesville and Albemarle, but you can report to the conversation. We're going to have hopefully a developer conversation where people can come get the answers, the straight answers, the truth, because I operate in transparency. We're not hiding and magicians. We're not doing that. So come to the conversation. If you really want to know, come and ask the hard questions. Make somebody answer you. That's what we want to do.
Good stuff. I'm wondering, the land and the building itself will be owned by the developer.
Yes. So he owns it right now. That company owns it right now. And it's kind of like condoing it out. Yeah. So it'd be 2 commercial space. One is right now dedicated to the MRC. And then there's this other commercial space that is currently committed for a grocery store, again, until that first certificate of occupancy.
Okay. So I'm wondering about the terms. So will there be a term on the land or the building, as far like a lease, if you will? And the lease could be for 80 years or 100 years. But I mean, we see this in different housing developments and commercial developments around the city. There's a lease. That lease ends. People are short-sighted in a sense because they think 100 years is a long ways away. But that time comes, and then the person who actually, or the company that actually owns the building has some options, whether or not to renew it, whether or not to move on to the next whatever that may be housed there. How does that play a role in all of this?
So the good thing is this is the start of this. So it hasn't formed. It hasn't shaped. Again, that possibility conversation, something like that could. Somebody mentioned at the meeting last night, well, we heard y'all had partnered with PHA, saying the FNA had. PHA is in the conversation with the developer as it relates to the housing. However, PHA, through some government funding, could possibly find some funding to roll in the commercial space for the grocery store to make sure that a grocery store goes there. That is the conversation that Charles has mentioned. That would not be Black ownership, right? That would be PHA owning it, right?
Is moving and shaking.
So, you know what I mean? So if we don't want that to happen, we have to find a way to do something different. And so, but it's important to know that all possibilities are on the table right now. So if we have an idea of what we want, one of the neighbors from Fifield showed up. She had her paper. She said, I got a proposal. I'm ready. I want people to mobilize. I don't want us to just walk away from this talking. And so we're going to have a conversation. September 4th is the food co-op conversation. The director from the National Co-op of Grocers is going to come here. He's going to do some education because our people suffer for lack of knowledge. So he's going to do some education up front, and then we're going to have a conversation, talk about this, and hopefully people report to the conversation. The very next day, we're going to also have coffee and conversation with people who might say, I want to know more about how we can start a community-owned grocery store, or I want to start a community-owned grocery store, or I want to start a group that wants to start a nonprofit to start a community-owned grocery store. And that's going to be at 9 a.m. that next morning. I am easily accessible. RN Heart Work. That's RN as in registered nurse, heartwork@gmail.com. Easily, you can also reach out to my office, 434-218-0740. I contact everyone back that contacts me. We're going to make this as accessible as possible. If you have a need, if you want to report to this conversation, we will meet you where you are.
Okay.
Good stuff. Miss Deanna McDonald. Thank you for joining us.
I don't
Appreciate
think
it.
we had to ask any questions, did we?
I mean, she on it. She on it. She
She
sharp.
was on. Right.
You know her
I think that's
stuff.
the right one for the job.
Yes, thank you. And, keep us posted. And of course, we'll continue to be working together again. Thank you for making, in my humble opinion, a partner of this great work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Did we
So I am Deanna McDonald. I am a nurse by trade. My business is RN Heart Work, Health Education Coaching and Consulting LLC. I report to the conversation about the Fifeville Neighborhood Grocery Store as a nurse, as a health community advocate, and this is my heart work. RN Heart Work, Health Education Coaching and Consulting LLC.
IMHO Talk Show. IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles.
Miss Max.
Razor.
Good job, Razor. Proud of you. Proud of you, young man.
Right on cue.
You can be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that because we are the home for so much over here. And one of the things that we are the home for is being the city that holds the Jefferson School. Now, if that's not enough history in itself, The Jefferson School then holds the African American Heritage Center, and y'all know that she's no stranger. Dr. Andrea Douglas is with us once again. Dr. Douglas, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mhm.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate being here with you.
Yes, indeed. And once again, can't wait to hear what you guys are up to nowadays. But before we dive into it, you brought a special guest with you today. Now, we got living legends in the building right now, Max and Racing. I know so many people have heard the name Jordy Yeager, but I don't know how many people have actually met Jordy Yeager, right? I mean, this
is it real?
Yeah, it's a real
mythical creature.
I mean, but the work is real. The work speaks for, and anybody that's a right-hand man of Andrea Douglas gets to be on point.
That's right.
So Jordy, thank you for all the great work that you do in the community and with the African American Heritage Center.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Yes,
I appreciate that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. So, without further ado, Jordy and Dr. Douglas, what brings you into that? Because we had Leslie on last week, and so there's like just so much great things going on, and we love being a mouthpiece and trying to encourage people to support and participate, and all that's going on. But what's on today's agenda? What's on tap?
Well, we're here to talk about the opening of our new part of Pride Overcomes Prejudice, which is the permanent installation that we have been working on for years.
Okay.
And the goal of this particular exhibition, it's called Toward a Lineage of Self, which comes from, we took an excerpt from a W.E.B. Du Bois speech. And in it, he's talking about history and the making of Black history by Black people towards a lineage of self. Right? And so as Jordy and I were thinking about what could encompass all that we're about to present in this exhibition, that felt very appropriate and poignant, especially as we understand so very deeply Charlottesville's African-American community literally built itself in the face of a legal system that absolutely wants to maintain the subjugation of Black bodies in every way.
That's right.
And Jordy and I have been working together since 2015. We have together deepened our understanding of this and been able to ask some really good questions. And there's no better researcher in the world that I know of than Jordy Yeager. You say, I need a pen out of 47 haystacks.
And he'll find it.
And he'll find it, right? And so this particular portion of the exhibition, which comes out of a series of conversations, I could talk about this all day long. And I don't want to keep talking because Jordy and I need to be doing this together. But it comes out of one question in some real ways. A member of our community said to me, I believe that my family once owned property where the university's tennis courts are.
Okay.
Right? And this is a Black woman. And she's saying that she believes that, and that's out of her family history. But there's no documentation. There's no way that she can find it. And I said, well, we can try.
Right.
And that was sort of the sort of crucible to another set of ideas. And that other set of ideas then led to this exhibition, or the way this exhibition is presented in relationship to a whole other set of ideas, right? So, and Jordy, how long have we been working on this particular piece?
At least 2020, so 4 years.
4 years. And it began with grants from the Virginia Humanities. We got an IMLS grant, which is the Institute of Museum and Library Studies. We got a National Trust grant, their African American Historic Places grant. And so this allowed us to really begin to sort of dig deeply into these histories. Bringing Jordy on as full-time as our digital humanities director was an important piece of that.
Congrats,
right?
Jordy.
So he works for us, and he works for all of you, honestly, because the program that we've created is not about the Heritage Center per se and the work that we do. It is about trying to build a meaningful repository of information about this community directed by this community, right? That question that person asked was a direction. It said, this was an important piece of information. I need to understand this. And so it sent us on a path.
Yeah. So let's stick a pin right there,
Mhm.
Dr. Douglas, because if someone says, I want to know something from my history, and to their knowledge, it's not even recorded, where do you even start? And I don't know if Jordy wants to chime in here, like, but
Jordy
what's the
should,
first thing
though.
that comes to your mind? Like, kind of take us through that process.
Well, you
Yeah,
for sure.
Lena.
You want to share a little bit first about Burke Brown Step and just the relationship with the Jefferson School, because that precedes me.
Right. Well, when we were creating anything that we started to do here, I was given a set of ideas,
Mhm.
right? And one of them had to do with genealogy.
Okay.
We were going to be a genealogy space.
Mhm.
And I don't know anything about genealogy, let's be honest. I know how to turn on a computer and maybe give you the password to
And you got to find the paper that is written down on.
Exactly, right. But I don't know anything about it. So we very early on went to the people that we know, and Charlottesville has people and has always had people. They were the very same people who were invested in even building an African American Heritage Center,
Okay.
who can do all manner of research.
Mhm.
And one of those groups is the Burke Brown Staff Afro-Genealogical Society.
Okay.
The Central Virginia Historic Researchers, there's this way in which all these groups sort of overlap each other.
Okay.
But Burke Brown Step, we gave them a permanent home at the Heritage Center.
Mhm.
They meet there. And they also advise us when we have a question. It's probably one of those places that we go first.
Okay.
And so, and they're researching broad-based kinds of information. They're researching. Many of them are connected to Monticello, and so they're researching their family histories. And so we rely on them quite a bit in terms of thinking about what is the methodologies even of
Okay.
how to go through that research. Someone like Shelley Murphy, if Shelley Murphy can't find it, it's because it just wasn't there. She can find a speck of dust if you give her time, right? And they're committed to it in significant ways. And I think taking on their advice, reaching out to them whenever needed, I think has helped us feel as if more comfortable, I think, even in the work, right? And so there are a lot of people out there in this world that we look to before we even start to think through some projects that we do.
Gotcha.
And they have a program every third Saturday,
Yeah.
is it, at the Heritage Center from 10 to noon is free public access to genealogical information. So if you're interested in just getting started in your family tree, if you know some pieces of it and you want to fill it out, if you've hit a wall in some of the records, they are the people to go to, and it's open and free every third Saturday at the Heritage Center. I will say that one of the things that's been missing is kind of where records don't readily find themselves accessible. And so that's usually in the courthouses. And so one of the first things that we did at the Heritage Center when we started looking at property specifically is to go and create memorandums of understanding, a relationship with both the city and the county clerk's court's office, where we got access to over 300,000 pages of property records digitized. And then we ran them through something called optical character recognition, which allows them to be searchable. It's basically the Control F function on your computer. And so we can search for names, we can search for streets, we can search for, in some cases where we really doubled down our efforts was looking for racist terminology, right? So terms of exclusion, terms of discrimination, we know that existed in our landscape in Charlottesville's history, but we never got a redlining map because Charlottesville wasn't big enough. And so it wasn't big enough to qualify for the federal standards to create a whole entire map. But that doesn't mean that racist housing policies didn't get enacted here, right? So we don't have that breadcrumb trail or that blueprint to show you exactly where, exactly who, and exactly how. And then, of course, the big question is exactly how much, right? Got invested into white neighborhoods, white communities versus black neighborhoods and black communities. And one of the other record sets that we really have started to delve into more and more are the land tax records, which go back all the way to the inception of the city. But in 1890, they are required to be segregated. So the first half of the books are all white records, and they're labeled white at the very top. And the last half of the books are all black records, and they're labeled black at the top. So if you combine those black record sets with the property records, all of a sudden you have the makings for the entirety of black land from 1890 to 1950, when they stopped being segregated. So for the first time, it becomes possible to then articulate what that landscape looked like. How did Vinegar Hill emerge? Was Vinegar Hill the first community? Turns out Kellytown, which, if you know where Trinity Episcopal Church and Zion Union Church at the base of Washington Park, Kellytown emerges 1867, 3 years prior to Vinegar Hill. 10th and Page, people will often cite John West as one of the first people to move in or buy land in 10th and Page. But we found a family, Jesse C., that moved there in 1867, at least 13 years prior to when John West buys his first property there. So these are the things that are starting to come out. And we're looking at Gospel Hill, Garrett Street, Ridge Street, South First Street, right? All of these communities that today we know, but where are their points of origin? One of the other stories that I'll share real quick is Allen's Store. Allen's Store is now where Marie Bed is on Rose Hill Drive, right? That's where Allen's Store moved. Prior to that, it was on 6th Street and Garrett, on the corner of 6th and Garrett, on the east side of town, southeast side of town, below the downtown mall for at least 40 years. And it was run by Dorothy and Kenny Allen. And they ran a general store. It was also a butchery. You could buy fresh produce. You could buy canned goods. They had, a program where if you couldn't pay that week, you could pay 2 weeks from then. All of those things that made it a community staple. And they operated there for decades until urban renewal forced them to move to Rose Hill Drive. We thought that's as far as the story went back. But we started looking at property records and found that Kenneth Allen actually got that land from his father. And if you look at his father, he's listed as a butcher in the public directories operating at that location. And then if you look even further, you see that his father, Walker Allen, bought that land in 1875. So you have almost 100 years of a black grocery store, butchery, general store operating in a community that isn't, you would never know, right? There's no signage, there's no interpretation, there's no commemoration. The Daughters of Zion, preservers of Daughters of Zion, Miss Bernadette Whitsett and Miss Edwina St. Rose do a wonderful job of interpreting the people buried there, and the Allens are buried there. But outside of that, there really is no like citywide interpretation of some of these very meaningful and very pivotal stories that center in these records. And so we needed to get our hands around the records first and foremost. And that's what we have access to, that we can then marry and make sense with the genealogy records that, that's outside of our expertise. That's really where Burke Brown Step shines.
And think about this.
Man,
now.
Jordy's like a mad scientist.
Listen, this is the kind of geeking out that he and I do. And it's kind of crazy when you think about what it is that excites you in a day.
Yeah.
One of the most exciting things for my day is when Jordy's like, look what I found today. And you're like, what? And then you take that piece of information and you start to extrapolate. You start to work beyond it, right? So if you were going to the point of even Deanna being here just before us, right? To the point, when you think about what the general world knows about grocery stores in Charlottesville, right? The thing that comes right to mind is Inge's store. Inge's store at the corner of 4th and whatever. But there were 7 black grocery stores here, right? And that history dates back, just as Jordy said, right? We're talking about 1890. We're talking about the late 19th century. And then you begin to say, let's imagine what that looks like. Let's imagine about that first generation out of enslavement, what they built.
Right.
Let's then imagine about that second generation out of enslavement and what they built. And let's start to think about that, not just as individual stories, but to begin to start to see that as a composite of a massive degree of involvement in the development of the city writ large.
Absolutely.
If I were going to have my druthers, when we're finished, I'm going to 3D model what this African-American community looks like in real time in space. What does it mean when you are full on the core, right? We want to applaud the neighborhoods, and we should. But what does proximity mean, right? 4th Street didn't end at Main Street. There's a point where 4th Street went all the way through to Fifeville.
Gotcha.
And so these are ambulatory connective spaces that say that people were more closely related than we describe neighborhood now, right?
Now, how much does oral history fit into the work that you do?
Everything.
Do you tap into that?
It's driven by it, and we want to We want to have oral history all the time. Ultimately, what we're building here at the Heritage Center is something that we call the Center for Local Knowledge. And the Center for Local Knowledge right now is driven by a Mapping Seville, Mapping Albemarle project, which is the covenant map, right? But when we asked the second question, what is the relationship of white property ownership to Black property ownership, right? And the question for me was, if a person owns property and loses it, at what moment does that covenant take on to that property and then forever remove it from Black ownership? Because that is the thing about covenants, right?
Right.
They begin as early as the moment that Black people are buying property, right? So, there is every single reason to think about this landscape and then think about the things that then can create community.
Yeah.
The implication of the Jefferson School coming to its location in 1894 is that it then becomes central, right? The implications of the 4 Black churches all around it. Generally speaking, how do you define a city center?
Yeah.
You look for the church, right? And what does the church generally look like in that city center? It has a certain presence, right? And within 10 to 20 years, this community builds 4 of them within proximity. Proximity because of the racist residential practice, because there's nowhere else to build them.
Yeah.
But then take each one as a historic map. What do they look like? Are they plain? Absolutely not. They're ornamented.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And you mentioned a few things, like a few tidbits that you said were missing, like Charlottesville being too small for redlining and like there's a bunch that that I could list. But my point is, what's your ultimate goal or goals from this project? Because you even make me start thinking about reparations. Like you make me think about so you make me think about a lot of things. So I'm curious. Again, if you had your druthers,
if I had my druthers,
what would be the benefits to the community?
But the whole point of what started some of this was to say, what is the real value dollar of the extraction of this property from Black property ownership as a consequence of racial covenant, right? We think about the free, in Charlottesville, there is an image of a free Black site, which is Catherine Foster site that the university put up their monument to that. She's a free Black woman who is buying her property as early as 1830s, right? There's a racial covenant that's put on that property. Jordy and I clarified that in 1926. That property is no longer Black. It belongs to the University of Virginia now.
Wow.
But in 1926, if a Black person walked down, it had its racial covenant. 1927, that Black person couldn't buy that Black property back. Right? So there are true implications for all of this. So we, in building the Center for Local Knowledge, one component of it is we're just not collecting data for the sake of collecting data, right? We're building a trail of activity, both white and Black. We're building within this the very opportunity for African Americans to take take hold of their own narratives. And have access to it in ways that they didn't have access to it before.
I have a question for y'all. A common thread that I hear, because I'm not from here, is UVA is always in the wings of everything, right? So Deanna was on here and talking about the grocery store in Fifeville. She said that UVA hadn't made a commitment yet to actually be a part of it. When it comes to the things that you're talking about, the land that was lost in the Gospel Hills and the Vinegar Hills and all this, right? How do you hold accountable somebody as strong as the University of Virginia? Because it's not just the college, it's the hospital. It's also the things that they use in order to, like the tennis court, like you were talking about, things that they use to enjoy themselves, right? When they want more land, they buy it out. They don't have to pay the city taxes because of their standards. So the racist practices of UVA seem to still be going on. It isn't as blatant. It's not drag you down the road by horse racism. It's just, I'm too big for you to be able to do anything.
But I think that's the point here, right? If I don't provide you with a body of information, if you don't know the things that we know, if the community doesn't know the things that we know, if the community doesn't have access through exhibition, which is where we started out, right? Like all of the material, much of the conversation that we're having here now, by the 20th, the community can walk into the Jefferson School, into the Heritage Center, and push buttons and begin to see these communities
like that
unfold.
Yeah.
And this exhibition is organized over certain overarching concepts, right? One of them being civil rights, right? We think about civil rights as a 1950s moment, right? But, you know, this community has an NAACP as early as 1918, and we have the documents with all the people who signed that name. And we know the reasons why that NAACP was formed. And we also understand that this community, as we start to think about it as an activist-based community, that Black people did engage in politics. They may not have won, but they engaged in it, you know? And so what does that information then do?
Yeah.
Do we hold people accountable, or do we inform people so that they are better able to live a life grounded in a deep understanding of belonging? And when you have that deep understanding of belonging, you claim your right to things, right?
Yeah, and that sort of leads into my next question for you. How can this work impact the current and modern urban renewal that's happening? Because like I think that's of utmost importance, right? Of like knowing your history, you know, in order, you know, to know where you're going, right? Knowing where you've been and know where you're going. So I'm curious on maybe some of the lessons learned, or what you all think that you could share with all the talk going on now about urban renewal to learn lessons from the past.
And how, I guess, the current zoning ordinance impacts that one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have been in touch with city planners and the people they've contracted with in terms of making this history available in terms of details, right? Block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. What do we know at this stage? For the first time in their rewriting of a master plan and a comprehensive plan, they have introduced a history of racial covenants and discriminatory policy. So that's a win, right? To acknowledge that. But one of the other things that we did, in addition to gathering all these property records, was to start to assess where did the city as a government invest infrastructure. So in the early 1900s, everybody's running on creek and well water, essentially. It's that at that point that reservoirs are created, pipes are laid, and houses start to be connected to running water. It's also that point where streets start to get paved and trees start to get planted. And this infrastructure of a city is starting to be invested in on a scale that hadn't been seen yet. And so what we did was we recognized that the city, every time it made a consideration of a neighborhood's request, it had it in the city council minutes. And so working with the city council's clerk, Keena Thomas, and others at city level, we were able to get copies of all of those years of minutes. And then we correlated those to the newspaper records for the same time, because Daily Progress had a city council reporter. And so they would document different details. And slowly it started to emerge, okay, these are all of the different petitions for water lines that are coming from North Downtown or Belmont or Fry Springs. And lo and behold, you asked about oral histories. That's actually how Dr. Douglas and myself first came into actually working together, was through an oral history project that talked with Sarad Davenport and Nikiah Walker and Harold Foley and Mark Bell, and a lot of different other folks that talk to that reality of our generations, our contemporary reality of being denied access to resource or being underinvested in and neglected in terms of infrastructure abandonment. And so what we knew is that the history was there, we just needed to put it together. And so we worked with 4 different years every semester at the University of Virginia. There was an architecture school student-led class that we gave 5 years worth of chunks of information. And slowly we started to get a spreadsheet, a giant CSV file that looked at every single petition of a water line that got made from a Black neighborhood or a white neighborhood. And now we're starting to map those, because what do you think happens to your home's value if you get a water line or a sewer line put into your neighborhood, right? It inflates it, it goes up. And so here you have this direct investment from a city-led government into private wealth, This is generational wealth that's being manufactured and used by white citizens on a level that is severely decimated to Black citizens. And that is the receipt, right? You talk about repair and reparations. That is that number, is that we're arriving at a hard number. You can adjust that for inflation. You can adjust that for cost of buying power. And then you layer on top of it the racial covenants and what property was taken through racial covenant and never legally allowed to return, right? You talk about the dairy market and the impact that it's had on 10th and Page neighborhood since it came to be. How many of us know that that was Black land? That was owned by John West, right? And so what are the conversations that need to be had around UVA's footprint as it starts to continue moving in different ways? We can't just hold them to their own word and say, oh, you're going to do nice by us, right? You're going to actually do the things that the community around you want. There have to be leverage tools, but we're not in that position. We're not community organizers. We're not political activists, but we do have the tools for which community organizers can then wage that fight and wage that battle. And we have the resources to be able to put the time and money into taking direction, saying, okay, what do you need? Do you need a list of every single Black grocery store from 1960 to 1860? We got you. Right. If you need every single business that operated on 5th Street going from Main Street down to Cherry, we got you. Right. So that's where we're trying to connect with neighborhood leaders to say, what are the battles that are coming? What are the battles you're ensconced in? And then how do we respond from a historical perspective to give you the ammunition that you need so that you can come to the table and say, this is what actually used to be. You can't rewrite our history. You can't, maneuver around this. This is the track record, and this is the repair that's needed. But it's not up to us to decide what that repair needs to be necessarily.
And it's a forensic process, right? When you think about what forensics are, we're not debating truth. We're debating fact. Right? There is no debate in that very actual document. I can pull that out and say, here it is. This is where that is. And I can also say, and as we're talking about practice, there is trend, and you begin to say yourself, you can quantify trend over time, and you can extrapolate based on that trend as well. I mean, that's what statisticians do. But there's something to be said about doing this work in the dark, about intuitively knowing something is wrong, but then having something real to articulate what that wrong.
Right. And thank you, Jordy, especially for your response, because I was thinking, what's still the real power in having this historical context? Storytelling is great, it's beautiful, it's very moving and emotional, but what is the real power here? How does it impact the decision making, the powers that be, policy, and different things like that? And you two have very nicely articulated how the information that you are providing can then be used by your community workers to create real change and work towards real change.
But also to think again about where we started, right? This is about the opening of an exhibition. This is about now an interactive space where it's not about going into an archive where you can talk to somebody who can tell you this information. This is about going into a building and accessing that information, not just as a singular piece of data, but as a historical space, because that is embedded into our overall narrative, what Pride Overcomes Prejudice looks like.
Like
This
a
is
virtual reality.
This is about the very people who went to the Jefferson School. This is about a legacy of people who live here, taken fully into understanding. And that's what exhibitions do. They give you access to information, and in a way that allows you to walk away with something. So this is certainly, on the one hand, it's about policy, but on the other hand, it's about a community understanding itself better.
So
right.
Yep. So Dr. Dell, tell the folks the name of the project again and how they can follow up with more information, if it's not too soon yet to follow.
We are ready. We're opening this exhibition to the public on September 20th.
Okay.
We will be offering tours of the exhibition, certainly on Saturdays, but we're also reaching out to our community. This work is not finished by any stretch of the imagination. And we want to go to churches and tell you about this. I've been here and talking with you all about what our park project is for Swords and Plowshares. This is another aspect of that land, right? There are racial covenants on the parks, right, in this community, right? 1926 is a pivotal year. We're about to, in 2 years, celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Public Assemblage Act. That's the thing that makes it illegal for Blacks and whites to occupy public space.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Goodman McIntyre buys Washington Park, Belmont Park, and McIntyre Park in 1926.
Mm-hmm.
Two of them are deemed as white parks, and one of them is a black park. 98% of the park land in Charlottesville at that moment is deemed white.
Mm-hmm.
As a collective thing, right? So we're interested in what does that mean? This is a conversation about leisure. This is a national conversation about who has opportunity to be in the land. Black people can be of the land. We can be workers in the land, but can we be in the land in a space of leisure? And what even does that look like as Charlottesville is working on its park comprehensive plan,
Yeah,
right?
thank you for that.
So that's policy.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So thank y'all. We do have to wrap, but y'all know we can talk to y'all all day. So definitely be back very, very soon. But before we let you go, I know there was some things I want Leslie to get mad at you, right?
No, the greens cook off, y'all.
Go ahead, yeah. Talk about the greens. You know how Leslie get it when she don't have her greens.
September 7th from 10 to 3 at the Jefferson School. You know, if you feel you have the baddest greens in town or the baddest pound cake that you've been holding secret, or even mac and cheese.
Yeah. No, Max wants mac and cheese.
Listen, I almost am thinking I can't win it, but I might come out with something. September 7th is your opportunity to wave your flag. So there's still time to register as a competitor, but certainly come early because you know it has notoriously been good food, right? So you know there are people who have won this over and over again for a reason.
Yeah.
So that's happening.
And when's that date again? I'll put it online.
September 7th, 10 to 3.
Did you give us a date that the exhibition was opening?
21st.
Yeah.
Saturday, 21st.
Okay.
What's the
Or the
Saturday?
20th, because I put the 20th.
I thought it was the 20th. You know, you live in sort of.
So it's that
21st?
weekend.
Okay, so make it the 21st. Sorry, y'all.
Okay, you good. Well,
And so I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussions, panel discussions, forums, different
Yeah,
things
we're
like that
doing all
held
of
surrounding
it.
that. Okay.
We not only want to present the information, but we want to engage with the community about this information. As I said, what we're trying to build is this local knowledge, and local knowledge doesn't come necessarily from the researcher. It comes from a series of conversations with all manner of people that add to this. You know, we've got a project, last thing, that we call the 1966 project. And that's a project that wants to speak to those people who were members of the 6th grade class when the Jefferson School becomes the integrated 6th grade. They're children at that point, but their memory of that, it's an interesting thing. What the Black children remember versus what the white children remember, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Douglas and Jordy, thank y'all. Please don't be strangers, and please keep us updated so we can continue to share this great work.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Till next time. I am Imho Talk Show. Y'all stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Trust me, you don't want to. We have developer John Settles coming up. Expert in what urban renewal is and redevelopment. Don't want to miss it. Tell a friend. I am Imho Talk Show.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning into In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
I to the ism, H to the Izzo talk show. Sir Charles.
Miss Max.
Razor.
That's right. The bottom of an hour, bottom of a show. We just bottoms up in here, you know. I'm sorry, Razor. I've been clowning all day.
I see. I like it. Love it.
Yes, indeed. But tell a friend, because you still got much more edutainment left. IMHO Talk Show on all your streaming platforms, because we're just delighted right now to be joined by these next two gentlemen, doing great work in the community. And it's been sort of a theme today. Like look at God. Like I just love how unintentional we can be, and it just comes together. That's how you know when it's a good thing, when a plan just comes together.
That preacher's kid be coming out of him at times, don't it? Look at God.
Just when a plan just comes together, and like this urban renewal theme and this redevelopment theme just kind of fell into place with the way that these guests have been here. And so one not a stranger, one may be a stranger to some, but the name probably is not. We're joined by none other than Mr. James Bryant. First, Mr. Bryant, can you hear us loud and clear?
Yes, I can.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And the other gentleman is Mr. John Settles. Mr. Settles, are you there?
I am. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, so we can't see you. So we just either see a virtual background or a room. I mean, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to be fancy and tech savvy, and now I did something to cause myself to disappear.
He locked himself up.
Hey, look. As long as the people can hear your good information, that is most important, sir. So we got you loud and clear.
Well, I appreciate it. I just dropped my daughters off to college, so I don't have anybody to help me. So
congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Yeah. So you saying you don't have your tech support? We understand.
Well, my son is still here, but if you have teenage boys, I don't know where he is, and he's not tech support.
Yeah. Say less.
Yeah, say less.
but let's so folks know Mr. James Bryant, stalwart here in the community. Particularly most recently, Mr. Brown, I guess, with the 10th Street corridor, right? Whether it's 10th and Page, 10th and Wertland, you have been very vocal with the community activism, making sure that the communities are represented in the face of redevelopment, urban renewal, things of that sort. Now, Mr. Sutter, I'm going to kick it to you because I want you to formally introduce yourself and your position, your job, because you've been around Charlottesville for a while now. So folks may have heard of you, but go ahead and introduce yourself formally and what your title is.
Great. So my name is John Settles. I'm with Wertland Development Consulting. So I handle the development. We are one of 3 partners in the 10th and Wertland project. So we're the for-profit minority partner. We're 100% African-American owned company. Okay. We're partnered with 2 nonprofits, POA, the Preservation for Affordable Housing. They're the lead partner, and then National Housing Trust, which has been here for a while. They are the co-developer with Piedmont Housing on Kindlewood. And so we got involved probably about 3 years ago in this project when UVA was first starting to talk about it. There's a brother who is in charge of development at POA who had been advising UVA on affordable housing strategies that they were looking to take on when President Ryan formed the working groups. And so as a result of that, they put out an RFP. We obviously were very interested because we've been following what's been going on in Charlottesville since the Ticket Talk March, and just the opportunity to be a part of bringing affordable housing in town near the university. Because obviously if you spend a little time doing your research, you realize that, we've got income inequality problems across this country, but Charlottesville is endemic in that situation. And obviously, housing situation worsens every year, and housing is foundational. And so this was a great opportunity to be a part of bringing housing in proximity to the university, which means in proximity to healthcare and jobs and other things, which typically low-income neighborhoods are locked out of. So excited to be here, still trying to learn the neighborhood, still trying to learn the community. Mr. Bryan has been a wonderful partner along with our other ambassadors. So I'm here because of him, and I'm just following his lead.
And where's your company based out of?
We're based out of Northern Virginia.
Okay.
So Virginia, DC based.
Now, first things first, Max and Reza and Mr. Bryant. Mr. Settles mentioned that it's a majority Black firm. And, he talked about his passion and the initiative when it comes to redevelopment and historically Black neighborhoods that we have here. Right. So I think that's the perfect place to start because, and Mr. Bryant, I want you, before Mr. Settles responds, I want you to touch on the importance of working with Black developers who understand and who are empathetic to the needs of a Black community and how you build that trust. And Mr. Settles, after Mr. Bryant, I want you to chime in on that because as I'm sure that you know and you've experienced by now, like historically Black communities are quite jaded. We're in the year 2024. Gentrification, urban renewal is something that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. So want to start with just how you do that relationship building and gain that trust. So Mr. Bryan, I want you to talk about the importance of that first.
First of all, I'm one of the many ambassadors that's on this committee. And I thought it was important that Mr. Settles come to your radio show to share what he and his organization and the ambassadors are trying to do in terms of affordable housing. It is critical because I have seen it up close and personal, being a native of Charlottesville, long-term residence in the 10th and Page Street. All of my life, I've seen the changes. I've seen the gentrification in the neighborhood. I've seen people who have passed on and the properties got away from them. I've seen people who have come into the neighborhood who just sort of just go into their own little cubicles and they don't interact with those of us who've been here all our lives. So it's become quite a different neighborhood. And so when I was asked to be one of the ambassadors on this 10th and Wertland Street affordable housing project, I immediately jumped on board. Because it's critical to have people that are already in the community. I never met Mr. Sellers until the first time we had our first meeting. And right from that first meeting, I was on board. Him and Mina, who's another partner, they came to us, they explained what is going to transpire in years and a few years down the road. And I think everybody, all the ambassadors, there are lots of questions, of course, lots of concerns. How is this going to affect our neighborhood? Who will go in the building? So he can go into more detail in that. But it is critical because unlike the other project that happened in our community, we didn't have any input. We were told one thing and something else was done instead. So the trust factor just immediately, the trust factor is not there. So with Mr. Settles and his organization, I think everybody feels that we're going to get a fair shake out of this upcoming affordable housing project that's coming down the pipe. A lot of people, and I think it was important that he come on the radio station to a wider audience. We've already met at the Jefferson School Heritage Center, but to explain to your audience what it is that's coming down the pipe and how this particular project is going to evolve over the next few years.
Thank you. And Mr. Settles, I want you to chime in there first, and then we, if you don't mind, and we can dig into the 10th and Wertland project. But yeah, just building that trust, being a majority Black firm, going into a historically Black neighborhood that's been disadvantaged.
Yep, absolutely. So let me make one clarification. We're 100%.
100%. I'm sorry. That's even better.
I want to clarify because
thank you for that.
That's important delineation. And let me just say, I think that's why we're really excited about this opportunity because, as you know, development, even affordable housing, there are not a lot of African American firms in the space and in the business, and oftentimes we struggle with the same issues that many small businesses, small Black businesses especially, suffer from, access to capital, access to opportunity and things like that. And so from the outset, we really wanted to make sure that this project was bigger than housing. It was not only housing affordability, and you'll hear me use that term a lot. And I've been using that term for about 15 years. And it's different from affordable housing because, affordable housing is usually about the cost of housing, which is critical. But housing affordability, I use that term because it includes all the costs related to the housing. So what do I mean by that? If you were in housing in the county, you have to add transportation costs into the cost of housing because you got to have a car, you got to have gas. And I really want to highlight that because that's a critical thing that a lot of people are not aware of. And it's really important right now because if you've thought about trying to buy a used car in the last couple of years, inflation has hit everything from the pandemic, but the price of cars are substantial. And so one of the things we're seeing a lot, and I'm talking to a lot of, tenants in other properties who work or live far away from where they work or where their kids go to school, where they shop, and transportation expense is a huge problem for them, especially if you're in areas where you don't have, a robust rapid transit system. And so those costs are not only financial costs, but they're costs to time and health. And so, housing affordability, I think, is really critical. And so as we're doing our homework, it's one of the things, that I believe in is you got to customize your solution because too many times I've seen in the industry, people pick up, the same design, the same project that they've used a couple of places, and they try to do cookie cutter and bring that in.
Mhm.
And so during the RFP phase, we were doing a lot of research, having a lot of conversations. And that's how I first met Mr. Bryant, because somebody recommended I talk to him. And, he allowed me to call and burn up his time, asking questions. And so when we learned about, Vinegar Hill and Star Hill and all the urban renewal and displacement and the gentrification, it became critically important to not only design a project, but allow the community to be a part from day one, from the ground floor, because we don't want to come in, like I said, and create something that, one, the community doesn't want, but two, that the community supports. So you'll hear me talk a lot about the commercial spaces and the offerings. And one thing, I want to get across to the listeners, as I've tried to get across to the community, we just build a building. So we've got some ideas, on what may go in the commercial spaces, but if we open the space up and we discount it to an entrepreneur and the community doesn't support it and they go out of business in 12 to 18 months, because if you've been in business, you know about business, 90% of businesses fail in the first year. And of that 10% to survive, 90% of them fail within the first 5 years. So it's really critical. So if the community is not going to support it, or if the community doesn't benefit, then it doesn't make sense. So we really need to hear from the community.
Right. Now, so that brings to mind, like when it comes to the developments, lost my train of thought. When it comes, when do y'all take? I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me though.
I have a question for you real quick. This is Razor. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. When I hear affordable housing or the way that y'all are breaking it down, right? One of the things that I think that they're missing here in Charlottesville is the access to financial resources. People's bank accounts don't match to be able to live a good life and be able to purchase these houses. So I was also one of the ones who was helping teach people financial literacy in order to build a house. And then you're looking at, okay, we had a brother here, Aaron, that used to be here, and he said the first thing we need to recognize is that there's a money problem. Right. So the good work that we're doing with your organizations and trying to make that amount of money come down so it's affordable, it has to match what people actually have in their pockets, in their bank account. And then if they do have businesses, I think that we don't do as good a job of making Black businesses fit what Black businesses are. Too often, I think we look at like PWI businesses and we try to match up our stuff to theirs. So they've been in business 5 years and they have this type of IRS reports and they have this type of credit score, and it just doesn't match our demographic. So then we don't have our businesses going into the places that you're talking about.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you for saying that. Let me piggyback that, Mr. Settles, as you answer, because I was thinking you're a developer, and what I hear from all the time is that developers want to, in the business, you're in a business, like you need to make money.
Absolutely.
Right. So how do you balance, to raise this point, how do you balance that with saying it's affordable, but you also like not feeling like that you're not getting shortchanged?
Right.
No, that's a great question. And it's a
developer.
Sorry, repeat that last question.
No, I just said how much of what Razor just mentioned is your responsibility or obligation as a developer.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a great question. And I want to answer that in two ways. So both from the perspective of responsibility, but also smart business. And so one thing I've always done, which is, kind of atypical of most developers, is I see it as a true partnership. And so I tell people, including the lenders and investors, we can't be successful if our tenants aren't successful. If they don't pay rent, we can't pay a mortgage, we can't pay taxes. So we're dependent upon our tenant partners. And I think that perspective is important, because then it says, if I'm your partner, then I'm in this with you. And I've got to be about making sure that you're in the best situation. And so to the previous question, absolutely, finances are a critical piece. And there's really so much of that to unpack. And you're going to make me, unpack my whole career, which is finance, investing, and all that. So we have to not only deal with, the income inequality, and obviously access to jobs is an issue, and then also the education and the financial literacy, so that we're making, intelligent decisions with our money. And so if my kids were here, they would tell you, I get on their nerves because, I have never bought them a pair of Jordans. I've said, you can get a job, you can, work some chores, and if you want to spend your money, I said, but we have to prioritize what we view as important and what we as a community, we have some spending things, but we also have some economic opportunities that are lacking. So economic opportunity is infused in this project, both with the commercial spaces, what we're trying to do in terms of pushing whoever becomes the general contractor to expand opportunities to minority contractors. But we're also looking at the operational, because a lot of times in these projects, they'll have opportunities during construction, but the real long-term opportunity is when the building's built. So one of the things we're working with the ambassadors on is we're saying, okay, we're going to have cleaning contracts out here. Are there local businesses that can become the cleaning contractor? We're going to have maintenance on the property. So we're working with, Hub and Quinn Hurley, and we're talking about how do we get local businesses that can paint or turn over the units and do these important repairs. So I think we have to have, that conversation as well around the economics, because as I tell people, we can bring down the the cost of housing initially, but there's certain costs that are going to go up that are beyond our control each year. So you have to increase the rent enough to keep in line with that. I don't know if you all, are like me, but I'm walking around turning off lights because the electric bill every year is going up like crazy. The water bill is going up like crazy. Property insurance is increasing like crazy. Even though we're up here in an area where we're not, impacted by the hurricanes and things like that, the insurance company and the business make money. So what they're losing money on in Florida, they're making it up on us in the rest of the part of the country. So, we have to make sure that people are in situations where they can continue to increase their income to be able to keep up with all the demands of housing and food and everything else. So hopefully that answers your question.
How many units will the development be?
180 units of housing, and then there will be 3 to 4 commercial spaces on the ground floor on the 10th Street.
And do you have a sense yet of the breakdown bedroom size? And are there varying AMI levels depending on the unit size?
Yes. So, unfortunately, I don't have a ironclad answer yet, because if you understand development, and I give the example, it's almost like when you're trying to buy furniture for your house. If you move to a new place and you go to a store and you have this idea that you're going to furnish the whole thing, and then when you get in there, you see the prices and you say, okay, we're going to start with a couch and we'll fill this in later on. So we're really dependent, because affordable housing is financed usually in one or two particular ways. The federal low-income housing tax credit is the majority way affordable housing is financed in America. And then each state has a local housing finance agency. So Virginia Housing is the Virginia state agency. So we're going to be applying to Virginia Housing next spring. They have once a year round. And typically with these projects, going in, you may have to apply 2, 3, 4 times before you win, because it's like the age-old adage, they got a little bit of money, but there's a lot of demand. So you may have, 40 projects vying for, enough money to finance 10. And so we have an idea now, but obviously we have to keep adjusting as costs and things going up. One of the things I do want to talk about, what we're trying to do, and it goes back to this point, is we're trying to emulate what CRHA was able to do with the Dave Matthews Band and raising money. So we can raise money. We're targeting having an AMI mix of 25, 25, 25, 25. So meaning 25% 0 to 30, 25% 30 to 50, 25% 50 to 60, and then 25% 60 to 80. So it'll be all affordable building, no market rate. But the reason we're doing that is we know the need at that 0 to 30. We know those individuals who are working minimum wage, they're struggling the most. So typically in these projects, it's about 10%. So we're trying to beef that up to 25. We're also trying to beef up that 30 to 50, because as we did the research and we looked at clicks, data, and other things like that, most of the entry-level jobs in Charlottesville were just above that 0 to 30. They're in that 30 to 50 band. And for what we've seen, there's a need for about 2,000 plus units today, and that number is going to grow. So remember, even if we win, this award next spring, this project won't come online for 2 years after that. So we're looking at 2027 at the earliest. So we know whatever the need is for housing now, it's just going to grow even more, at that timeline. So we're trying to do that.
I got
Another question about the development part of it, just a real quick one. In terms of parking, that's a growing discussion here in the city. And so do you have a proposal for that yet, or at least what's on the table at this time? I know the city, members of the city are trying to get people to bike more, walk more, different things like that. What are your thoughts on that?
So once again, I'm answering two ways. So I got positive and I got not so positive. Okay. So the building will have parking. It won't have enough parking for all residents, but it will have substantial parking for the residents, and it'll have parking for the commercial spaces. So we think from a parking perspective, we'll be doing pretty good. We know we've heard from the community, and so we want to acknowledge the good and the bad, and the community has been a great partner. Traffic, and I've sat on 10th Street, so I know traffic is already an issue. So there will potentially be traffic problems, but we will have parking. And we know the city and the new ordinance is really going away from parking, but we think it's important to still have parking because, as I tell people, I know there's seniors or people with health issues that may not be able to bike or may not be able to go, to the grocery store or afford, Instacart. So there will be parking underneath the building.
Them businesses gonna be. I know Razor got something. But those businesses gonna come for you, John. They're gonna be at City Council, at City Hall, talking about how you're impeding business with this. Like, so how you gonna refute that?
Give me a more clarity on what you mean. How we're gonna be impeding business.
Like, for instance, there's, like Max said, there's already parking issues and whatnot. So I can imagine there being some right of center, let's say, business people who gonna look at it as, I don't care about this affordable housing. Like, I want more access to my business. And now you're taking potential parking from me and you're going to make this area more congested. People aren't going to come to my business. Like, so how do you, what's your rebuttal to when you get pressed up against, local business owners when you're trying to do something for the community?
Well, I think the first thing is we're not taking parking away from any business currently. The little bit of parking that's on site, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I can get that to you. Majority of that parking is because it's owned by UVA now, for UVA employees. So we're not taking anything away from the businesses. Actually, I would think the project would actually enhance businesses in this neighborhood because, one, as you bring 180 people, you're bringing a density of people. So if they've got a product that's affordable and beneficial, they've got residents there, but then the commercial spaces are going to be an attraction that are going to be bringing people. So it brings more vibrancy to that particular block. So with vibrancy, they should be able to benefit if they've got something that benefits the people that are living upstairs and that are coming to those community spaces.
So where will drivers park who aren't, their space isn't provided for?
So that's a good question. We're still trying to work through. There's more than likely going to be, a few spaces for people that are coming. Obviously, if this is wildly successful and we have hundreds of people, we don't have parking for that. We don't have that solution now. That's one of the big challenges, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but in urban areas, they're dense like this, parking is hard.
But there'll be a bus stop in close proximity, I assume. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, there's a bus stop.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
We're on the radio. Why you gotta ask it? That's what you
because this is going to help or hurt, one of the two. When we talk about affordable housing, a lot of times people think that means black, right? I understand that we have a all black board, but I would think there would be some huge pushback if we were only housing it, or the majority of the housing was going to people of color or black people, right? Or is this a program that is set to give housing to the black community? Or is it people of color? Or do you have to do like we require out of some of the white developers, to where they have to make sure that they incorporate a certain amount of people, a certain amount of white people, a certain amount of college students, a certain amount of whatever. Or do you fall under that criteria? Because I know when I listen to people,
The
you start
income levels, right?
Huh?
The income levels.
No. I'm not talking about income levels because honestly, if I was a developer, I would rent to college kids right out who have all this debt that I know is going to have a good job through the university.
Mhm.
So they meet that low income if they do it right after graduating. But that's not the same thing as the mom with the 3-4 kids with no car
Mhm.
that's at the max of what she can do because she's a LPN or whatever. And I'm just saying because I do a little business. So I'm just looking at the devil's advocate, so to speak. When we talk about low income housing, I don't want black people to think like, oh, they developing housing that we gonna give to black people to do better. Because like you said, we gotta make smart business decisions, and you also have to go by what is morally correct. So can you kind of let people know that just because we're talking about affordability and the board is black and the organization is black, we're not talking about just giving this to black people.
So that's a great point. And so let me add to what you're saying. Legally, we can't do that.
Right.
There are federal fair housing laws, so we can't
Right.
discriminate against any class. So we can't break the law. We can't get in trouble. So yes,
Yeah, I just want you to clarify because people think like when we got Obama, we got a black savior and he gonna do X, Y, Z. Like people need to understand you got rules and regulations that you have to follow, and that doesn't mean that they have to badmouth you because they don't fit the criteria to go into one of these places.
Absolutely. So yes, while we can have the income restrictions, we can't have racial restrictions. Obviously we can open up, make sure everybody has access to it. We are gladly going to be taking Section 8 vouchers. So that's a financial tool. It's not a racial tool, but the reality is the majority of Section 8 vouchers are people of color. So I'm glad you brought that up though, because I want to be clear. We have to follow federal law, so we cannot discriminate. You brought up another piece that's important as well. The low-income housing tax credit law prevents any project from renting to undergraduate students. But in the example you gave, we couldn't discriminate against somebody that graduated a year or two ago.
Right.
That's low income.
Right.
So
I just want people to understand that while we're over here arguing about the taxes going up because of the people that's moving into the place and the gentrification, that there a lot of people have figured out how to work the system, so to speak. And I don't want them to look at you two gentlemen like you lied to them just like they did at the dairy market. That's all.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a great point.
Yeah, great point. So Max and Razor, here's what I'm thinking. And ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by developer Mr. John Settles and community activist Mr. James Bryant. So kind of piggybacking off of that, y'all, Mr. Settles, when it comes to trying to give priority to the people that such affordable developments and affordable housing spaces are geared towards, what is the methodology to actually do that? And this kind of feeds off of what Razor was just saying, which is the fear really of the community as a whole is that this is just more gentrification, which means I'm going to get pushed out. So as a developer, or you may even say, well, that's not my bag. That's actually the responsibility of A, B, and C. So you can answer it that way if that's the case. But I'm curious, what's the methodology to make sure that the affordable housing gets to the people who need it and it just doesn't become a whitewashed neighborhood, so to speak, or not even, like to Razor's point, kind of not even just about it being a color thing, but it ends up pushing out people who need the housing because they otherwise couldn't afford it.
So that's a great point. So I want to go back to Razor's earlier point. So that's one of the reasons we are trying to have these conversations early and often, so we're getting the information out. Because one of the things that I think will really help this, and we're really trying to level the playing field, is taking advantage of that time. Because I'm saying that the earliest this building will be 2027. So we want to let people know it's coming. And, we're talking with local organizations about providing some of that financial literacy and credit counseling so people can prepare themselves.
Okay.
Because one of the things that's a problem for a lot of people is, they can't qualify credit-wise. They don't have, the money saved up for security deposit. So we recognize, those impediments and issues. So if we can tell people now, especially when we close on the financing, then we have certainty. Because right now it's up in the air. So
are you doing the 3 times the rent? Are you doing that? Because I mean, that is the way of the world. Like, because I'm talking to you as the businessman. Like, you want to make sure people can afford what they're going into. So does a person have to be prepared to be able to come up with 3 times the rent or show that, which seems to be goes on in Charlottesville now?
No, we know that goes on. And that's more of a market rate concept. So,
okay.
We in affordable housing.
Yeah, not matching market rate.
Yeah, no. And if we did that, if we match market rate in affordable housing, we'd have half vacant buildings.
Okay.
So we know we got to be flexible there. What there's less flexibility really is on, the severe credit delinquencies, the recent evictions, things like that. So once again, that's why we want to, partner with these community organizations to start providing this credit counseling. And you all are raising great questions. So we want to explain to the community, here is the things that people are going to be looking at. And here's what you need to do to prepare yourself for that.
Wait a minute. Sir, I don't mean to cut you off real quick. You just said something that just like hit me in my gut. Okay, we know that these lenders and everybody have been predatory. So if we have people that have recent evictions because the landscape has been set to make people fail so they can get other people to have more money, shouldn't we kind of look at that differently? Like a recent eviction in the 80s, yes, I understand that. A recent eviction here in after post-COVID, with the way that everybody jacked rent up, and it just seems like that's kind of a slippery slope.
So I think that's a great point. I think everybody has a story, right? And you have to give them the opportunity to tell the story. Mm-hmm. I think what's, part of a problem in the industry is, with the advancement of technology, everything now is just AI decided decisions, so you don't get to, explain your story and say, here's why, because I think there's justifications that you can overlook. And then there's situations that unfortunately you cannot overlook. Okay. So a perfect example of that, if you have somebody that had a medical crisis and they were in the hospital and they couldn't work for a while, that makes sense. That's justifiable. If they've been working all along and haven't had the job loss and just have made some different financial decisions, then that's a little harder to overlook. But I think having individuals that are part of the process versus the computer, I think gives you that humanity and gives you that, ability to address things on a case by case.
I agree.
Gotcha. And with the with the project being funded in the way that it is, federal funding, and it being affordable housing, does HUD have any requirements in terms of eligibility of tenants or applicants that have to be implemented in this type of project?
Mm.
So one, I want to acknowledge you all are asking some great questions. I appreciate this. So yeah, you have a series of rules that you have to follow. So obviously low-income housing tax credit is an IRS program. So they have their set of rules, and then there's federal rules as well. And then obviously if you've got HUD money in there, you've got to follow those. So you've got kind of a tiering of regulations. It's really kind of a box that you've got to fit. And with affordable housing, unlike market rate, these are not just upfront, but you have annual certifications where you have to, report on all of this that's happening. So it's a very scrutinized product and project.
Changing gears here for a second. Who's your football team?
You know what? So I'm a Jets fan. My son teased me about that.
Okay. No problem. You don't mind suffering? I can trust you.
I like Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. I roll with Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, he's from Virginia. Yeah, of course.
That's my second team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we are joined by developer Mr. Settles and community activist Mr. James Bryant. So Mr. Settles, as we're sort of approaching the end of the interview, I have a few minutes left. Want to shift gears a little bit and talk about more of the entrepreneurship, because I had the privilege of meeting you and hearing you over at Jefferson School when y'all had the 10th and Wertland Forum. So this this is big to me, and it's big to all of us here. We here are entrepreneurs, business owners as well. So when it comes to the community buy-in and entrepreneurship opportunities that could come from the commercial space, and just like the ownership, right? The economics of it. Talk a little bit more about that, about your ideas to try to help prepare folks who could benefit from it commercially.
Appreciate it. Thanks for asking that question. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have 3 to 4 commercial spaces. We have some ideas. So let me start with, these are just our ideas. We've been, running these through the community ambassadors.
You
And
said
so
ideas.
Yes. But one thing we're clear on is there's a real shortage, almost at an epidemic level, of early childhood development slots. So we're thinking that one will be an early childhood development center. And I chair a board of a nonprofit in DC called Southeast Children's Fund. And so I'm hoping to bring that model here. And we're in DC's poorest neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's what I call ground zero. So if you hear about all the murders in DC, it's happening in this neighborhood, high school dropouts, it's almost criminal. The schools in this community in Southeast DC.
Where you, Barry Farms?
No, this is deeper than Barry Farms, Washington Highlands.
Okay.
So if you know South Capitol and Atlantic, we're behind Valley Green. So
okay,
you know what that neighborhood is like. But we have a nationally recognized program there where we not only provide early childhood development, but we have what's called a Professional Development Institute, where individuals get the child development certification, and then we provide scholarships for them to go on and get their associate's and bachelor's degree.
That's what's up.
So we're looking at this as not only an early childhood space, but an incubator space. So those individuals that may be providing childcare in their home can sophisticate and grow into an actual space, and they can get the mentorship. Because one of the things that's a big struggle, and I know it's one of the problems that brought down MACA, is the regulation. So as the previous question was about that federal regulation is real, but so understanding that and really being able to address that, I think there's an opportunity and a need in the community for early childhood space. The second space in the POA Resource Center, if you think about this, it's going to be similar to a Jefferson school. It's just a space where different nonprofits can come in and they can provide various services. So during the day, they may have, classes for seniors, computer classes, exercise classes. After school, it may have tutoring and after school, financial literacy, job training. So we want to just provide, both those cubicles and the conference rooms where organizations can come in and provide services to the community. They can also be housed there because once again, we know, as a nonprofit with tight budgets, spaces, at a premium, and it's expensive. And so, the third space that we're talking about is potentially a mini mart, because we know historically there was a corner store in this corner for years that was a part of the community. So potentially could bring that back. And then the fourth space, we were talking about a financial literacy, but we got some surveys in that result at Jefferson School, and that wasn't as high up the list. So we'll have to go out to the community, have them vote a little bit more. But let me just say that the goal is to have these spaces, we're going to deeply discount them. So that's why we want them to be successful. We want the right businesses, because we're probably going to discount them 75% off of what commercial market rate is for space.
Why no food? Why no active food? No, he said mini mart. I'm talking about food, like going and actually ordering food, not food
Hot
like
food.
Right, not food that you got to go get and prepare and then take back.
Because we're in Charlottesville.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we change the
many
narrative,
restaurants.
no, we don't have enough.
Can I ask you a question real quick? Because I know we're up against the hour. Ultimately, this project has to be approved by the Planning Commission and ultimately approved by City Council. Have you and your team been in any discussions with the members of the Planning Commission as you move through the different phases of this project? And
Yes. And so let me ask 2 questions quickly. One, we've been in communication through our architects, civil engineers with the city. We actually submitted for site plan approval about a month ago. So mid-September, we're expecting those first comments to come back. And as you know, we're one of the first projects under these new guidelines. So we're making our way through this. And to the previous question, so once again, whether it's prepared foods, we need the community to step forward. So one of the things we've actually talked about is, and mini mart is kind of the term we're using loosely, because people advise us to use that other than corner store. Really just a space for entrepreneurs where they can just sell their products. So it could be cooked, it could be cold. From the previous guest, whoever has those greens and those pound cakes, you know, they can get space here. The thinking was, when I put it together, was just to have space for entrepreneurs that could sell their products. Because I've seen successful models where people can go from, you know, baking in their kitchen to selling their, you know, baked goods and creating a business. So, but
it
once
can be
again,
a pop-up shop space then.
Once again, we build buildings. We don't run businesses. So whoever is going to run it, they can figure out, you know, how they can make that work. You know, obviously it's more cost when you go with cook foods, you know, because you have to have grease traps and things like that if you're cooking on site. But we're going to provide the space. If there's an entrepreneur with a viable plan and they can get it at a price where they can be successful, we're all for it.
Got you. Well, Mr. Settles, Mr. Bryant, thank y'all. We are up against the end of the show, but I want y'all to leave on your words, your final words. Mr. Bryant, feel free to chime in as well. But it's just of utter importance because, again, Mr. Settles, you know the history enough of Charlottesville. I'm sure Mr. Bryant has had conversations with you, and you seem like a learned gentleman when you go into communities. So what would be you all's words moving forward, and as far as how folks can follow up with you on them trusting the process? Because that trust is a pivotal word, right? Right. It's a lightning rod. So just your last words on that moving forward, how people can reach you and how they trust the process. So
real quick, I'm gonna speak briefly and cede to Mr. Bryant because I feel like I've dominated too much of the conversation, and I want his word to be the last word. But you know, trust is earned. You know, I know nobody's just gonna hand over the trust because I know there's a lot of mistrust, rightfully, because people have been betrayed too much. So we just have to continue to show up, to listen, and do the work and prove, that we are here to stay and that we really care about this being successful. So, I appreciate that. I could, Mr. Lewis, you have my information. You can feel free to share it if anybody has questions. So I appreciate that. Mr. Bryant, let me cede to you.
Yeah, you all asked some great questions. And as just one of the many ambassadors, you can rest assured that I am on board with this project. If I didn't think it was going to be something that the community could rally around and the citizens of Charlottesville, I wouldn't be sitting here. And I felt it was important that Mr. Sales come to you all and share his thoughts about this upcoming project so that everybody will continue. It's a work in progress. We want people to ask questions. We want people, just like you all did, you had great questions, and Mr. Sales did a great job in responding to the questions. But continue to ask those important questions because in the final analysis, this project is going to benefit a lot of people. And I'm happy, and a lot of people, all the ambassadors I can speak on their behalf are very happy about this moving forward.
That is awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen. And Mrs. Settles. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just want to thank you all for the opportunity, for the great questions.
Of course.
And for that Commanders fan over there.
Get him.
Now that Dan Snyder's gone, I may come back. But
right. So, Mr. Settles, what is your website? Because I'm sure the folks would want to look up more information about your firm. Can you give me that website?
Yep. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna email it to you.
Okay.
So that way you have the accurate information. Okay.
Yeah. Got you. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and we look forward to seeing you in the community and hey, like rebuilding Black Charlottesville.
That's right.
That's right.
Thanks. You all have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you. All right, family. Thank y'all. Miss Max, Razor, y'all good?
Yeah. Thank you for staying with us past 3 hours. Hopefully you're feeling a little more informed about what's happening around the city of Charlottesville. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
Make way for the OG Clee Logan Soul Lounge.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.